Okay, Mrs. H Psychology. These videos are specifically for AQA Psychology, but obviously they would be able to help you with other specifications too. So this is for paper 2, approaches, and this is actually part 2 of the psychodynamic exam essay questions. So trying to help you tackle these exam essays and how to structure them. This particular one is on the contributions question. Okay, so this time it's discuss contributions of the psychoanalytic or psychodynamic approach. So this particular question is from quite a while ago, January 03, and it was from AQA Spec B, so Sci B4 paper. But having said that, these are still very relevant to the new specification. Okay, so if I just read this through, they might give you a little bit of a stem, so something like this. 2 students discussing psychoanalytic perspective. One said, psychoanalytic perspective has too many limitations to have made any real contribution to psychology. The other one replied, I disagree. In many ways, they have contributed to our understanding of behaviour. The question that you need to focus on is this: describe and discuss. They might now word it discuss or evaluate contributions of the psychoanalytic perspective to understanding human behaviour. Okay, so that's the first part of your essay question. Second part is really, in your answer, refer to at least 2 topics that you've studied. Okay, so this one would have been a 12 marker. For you guys now, we can have 16 marks as our maximum. Okay, so describe and discuss contributions, but refer to 2 topics. So this contribution question, all it takes is a bit of tweaking with exactly the same material we've covered in part 1, but it's just that you need to make sure you're focused on this particular question. You mustn't just answer the question you want, it's got to be focused on the question they ask you. So let's have a look at this question. So this contributions one, basically what they're asking with any of these contribution questions, they're asking you, what have they introduced? What have they given us? What have they added to our understanding of human behaviour? Okay, so we're really always going to go back to whichever perspective, whichever approach, their key assumptions, because that's what they are trying to tell us our behaviour stems from. Okay, so it's always going back to that. Remember, this particular question is asking us also to refer to 2 topics. We don't have to describe the topics. All we're going to do is pepper our essay with illustrations from those topics. Okay, so it's like a sprinkling. Topics are not approaches. Okay, be careful with that. So sometimes students, when we first start, are a little bit confused with that. Topics are topics. So things like addiction, gender, memory, social influence, OCD, depression, morality, personality, and so on and so forth, whichever topics you've studied. So my recommendation is for planning, you use one of my A3 sheets, and recommendation is minimum really to complete 2 lines of that. So I'll show you that in a moment. And obviously for higher bands, you need to be doing 3 or 4 fully developed evaluation points. So I will show you that in a moment. Okay, so with this, I've got various different things on the screen. So we are going to use, and I'll bring up now the key boxes, the A3 summary sheets. Let me show you them now. So for revision purposes, you might want to use this, which is basically our PEEL, PEEL. Okay, so we always add in extra E's to try and get higher in the levels, higher in the bands. So P is your key term, words you need to explain it, evidence for it possibly, and then obviously evaluate. And you could put in your link back to the key question. So that is a summary sheet that you could use, but actually we're going to use our essay one, which I'm going to show you. Okay, so our standard structure is point, explain, evidence, and then we start to give some evaluation, and we're going to explain that evaluation, and we're going to develop that evaluation, and then we could add in a link back. Okay, so I'm trying to, if you remember, this is really your level, you know, level 1, level 2, starting to get into higher in level 2 and getting on to level 3, and here we've got top level 3 and level 4. Okay, so we're really trying to expand, and each time we're thinking, so what? Why is that relevant here? Why is it worth me saying that? Why do I need to include that? What does it actually mean? So the so what or the however is, and always trying to think about that, you know, kind of the parrot on your shoulder going, so what? So what does that mean? So what? Okay, so just keep developing that in order to get your access to higher marks. And here, remember, I would want to see a minimum of 2 of these rows. For higher levels, you're trying to go for at least 3, if not more, in the time that you have. So if we go back to the question, discuss contributions of psychodynamic or psychoanalytic perspective approach, in other words, but refer to at least 2 topics. So here we're going to introduce our topics, and I'm going to show you now how possibly one way of doing that. So let me bring that sheet up again and show you how to do that. Okay, so remember, this is just a suggestion. I'm sure a lot of you could do loads better with this. I'm just doing it as a quick illustration for you so that you can get going with these on your own. Okay, so we've got our point, an example of a key contribution. So what did he bring to our understanding of human behaviour? Right, we're literally going to name it. We're going to flag that up to the examiner. Okay, so we're going to say one contribution is understanding of the unconscious mind. We need to explain that. What do we mean by that? Well, it's not a dumping ground for unimportant events, as was previously thought, but it's still actively influencing our behaviour. Okay, so here we can now start to introduce topics. For example, maybe memory. Let's say defense mechanism of repression. Okay, so the idea that hidden memories still are affecting our behavior. For example, you know, it's possible that somebody self-harming may have something that's deep in the unconscious, which they're not aware of, but is still causing them a lot of angst, a lot of upset. And, you know, their behaviors may be shown in, for example, self-harm or addiction, something like that. Okay, so now we need to start introducing our evaluation. However, one problem with that is that maybe these are considered unscientific processes. For example, it's impossible to operationalize some of those unconscious concepts. This is all supposed to happen in the unconscious, so we're not aware of it. So, you know, libido, Oedipal process, going back to these topics of memory, this repression, it's in the unconscious. So how do we access that? How on earth would we scientifically test it? So in the unconscious, developing that a little bit more means we can't empirically test this. All right, it makes it impossible to falsify or support it. So we can't develop the psychodynamic approach even further, and therefore it lacks scientific credibility. But we would perhaps want to put on, but on the other hand, the idea of an unconscious affecting us is widely accepted today by loads of people, to be honest, probably most people. So we can say it is a sound contribution to our understanding of human behaviour. Okay, so obviously you can develop these in various different ways, but it's just to illustrate that really you're just trying to introduce a little topic. You might want to make reference to that a little bit further. Okay, you could refer and link your evaluation back to this one specifically, but we could just go with the general concept that it's difficult to test. You would then go on to your second childhood, second contribution, and here we would say, okay, so he contributed the fact that childhood experiences are really important for our adult behaviour. What do we mean by that? So we want to refer to psychosexual stages, and then we can go on to develop that. So if I pause for a minute and go back to the information I've provided. Okay, so you can develop these as just suggestions. Another key contribution, as I've said, is childhood experiences, and you could just develop those as you like in terms of evaluation. We also have another contribution. He influenced many other people. We've got also his therapy and so on and so forth. Okay, so they're all contributions that he has made, or that the psychoanalytic approach has made. Okay, so that's that. If you have a look at the mark scheme, basically the mark scheme is saying contributions identified, described, thoroughly discussed and applied to different topics. The answer must refer to 2 topics because that's what they asked for. and where possible a little bit of empirical evidence, or although obviously with Freud we don't have a huge amount of empirical work to support it, but we do have some, but we also have reference to his concepts which should be in there. And discussion obviously well balanced, so what's good and what's bad, you know, what positive strengths and what weaknesses he's added in, strengths and weaknesses he has contributed, I should say. And this approach really applies with any of those essay questions on contributions. Just tweak your key assumptions. What have they actually, just decide which of those have contributed to our understanding of how and why we behave as we do. So that's your approach. And then usually they'll just want you to discuss that. So you're saying what was great about that, but also on the other hand, obviously many limitations. Here they're asking you to refer to topics. It is quite demanding, but hopefully I've shown you just literally peppering, introducing and showing that you understand how it applies to the different topics.